I picked out this story just for you. Let's listen to it.
Chapter 1. The Gilded Cage. The Zenith Drone Weapon Development Corporate Headquarters was not so much a building as it was a statement, a monument to corporate hubris suspended in the void between the orbits of Jupiter and its Trojan moon, Europa. It was a sprawling, multi-leveled structure of polished obsidian and shimmering energy fields, designed to project an aura of impenetrable power. From the outside, it resembled a crystalline spiderweb, with central hubs and spires connected by transparent, gravity-nullified tubes that glowed with a soft, internal luminescence. Within these tubes, silent, sleek transports moved like phantoms, ferrying the elite of Zenith's command staff to their various duties. For most, the headquarters was a place of sterile order, of climate-controlled environments and hushed, efficient productivity. For Kaelen, the Galactic Trader, it was a cage, and the bars were made of pure, unadulterated greed. Kaelen didn't belong here. His natural habitat was the grime-streaked hulls of trading outposts on the fringe, the cacophony of a black market auction, the subtle dance of deception and deal-making in a dimly lit cantina. His attire, a well-worn synth-leather coat over a simple, high-collared jumpsuit, was an affront to the pristine, minimalist uniforms of the Zenith security forces. He was a creature of the Syndicate Collective, where profit was the only god and chaos its most fervent prayer. Here, in the heart of Zenith, the only god was technological superiority, and its worship was conducted with the cold precision of a machine. He had been invited, or more accurately, his presence had been mandated by the Syndicate boss, a man known only as Valerius. Valerius had a stake in a new drone propulsion system Zenith was developing, and he wanted independent verification, a polite term for industrial espionage. Kaelen currently found himself in the C-7 gravity calibration chamber, a vast, spherical room at the apex of the central spire. This was the proving ground, where new drone designs and their pilots were tested under the most extreme conditions. The chamber was a marvel of engineering. Its walls were a seamless, dark metal, punctuated by glowing blue conduits that hummed with immense power. In the center of the sphere, a complex, multi-limbed rig held the drone in question, the Wraith 7, a sleek, arrowhead-shaped craft bristling with weapon ports that were, for this test, filled with inert training munitions. The entire purpose of the chamber was to simulate zero-G combat, allowing the drone to move freely in all three dimensions while its pilot, housed in a control pod just outside the main sphere, put it through its paces. Kaelen stood on an observation gantry that circled the chamber's equator, one hand resting on the cool, smooth rail. He was feigning interest in a data slate provided by a Zenith liaison, a woman with a face as rigid as her corporate loyalties. He was actually watching the pilot, or rather the mechanic. Zero-G combat was the test, but the subject was not a trained soldier. It was a single, solitary figure in a drab, gray maintenance suit, floating weightlessly inside the sphere alongside the Wraith 7 drone. This was the Zero-G mechanic. Kaelen didn't know his real name. In the intel Valerius had provided, he was simply designated as Zero. He was a legend among the fringe tech heads, a ghost in the machine who could fix anything, build anything, and apparently pilot anything with an engine. He was unaligned, a free agent whose skills were so profound they transcended faction and loyalty. He was the one, a perfect specimen of human potential, and his presence here was the reason Kaelen's mission was so delicate. The mechanic moved with a grace that was almost beautiful. He wasn't piloting the drone, he was dancing with it. He used small bursts from his suit's thrusters to pirouette around the Wraith 7, his gloved hands occasionally reaching out to tap a console here, adjust a sensor housing there, all while the drone itself performed complex maneuvers. He was calibrating it, feeling its responses through some preternatural connection. Kaelen felt a grudging respect, but it was quickly soured by the sheer impossibility of his task. How was he supposed to get data on this system with this phantom guarding it? Valerius's plan had seemed simple enough: create a diversion, hack the local data node, and get out. But looking at the effortless mastery of the man floating in the void, Kaelen knew this wasn't going to be simple. It was going to be a bloodbath. A chime echoed through the gantry, followed by the synthesized voice of the central AI. Calibration sequence complete. Commencing 0G combat simulation. Protocol Omega. Target designation. Live subject. Subject. Galactic Trader. Designation Kaelen Var. Kaelen's blood ran cold. He snapped his head up from the data slate, his eyes locking with the liaison's. She offered a thin, humorless smile. Mr. Var, your verification is now hands-on. Zenith believes in a thorough testing process. The Wraith 7's final validation is against a live, unpredictable target. Consider it an honor. The mechanic, Zero, stopped his dance. He slowly rotated in the void until he was facing Kaelen through the reinforced transparisteel of the observation gantry. His helmet was opaque, a featureless black dome, but Kaelen could feel the weight of his gaze. It was a look not of malice, but of simple, unadorned purpose. He was a tool, and he had just been given a new task. "You can't be serious," Kaelen said, his voice tight. He was already backing away, his hand instinctively going to the concealed dataport patch on his wrist. This was not the plan. "I am always serious," the liaison replied, her finger tapping a control on her own console. A section of the gantry floor behind Kaelen hissed open, revealing a small, spherical ejection pod. "Your transport to the combat chamber. Please do not force us to use more persuasive methods." Kaelen looked from the open pod to the featureless helmet of the mechanic floating just a few dozen meters away. The Wraith 7 drone shifted, its weapon ports glowing with a soft, menacing red light. The trap had not just been sprung, it had been built around him from the moment he'd stepped aboard. He had been played, not by Zenith, but by his own boss. Valerius had known this would happen. This wasn't a mission to acquire data, it was a test. A test for Kaelen. His survival depended not on his wits or his strength, but on the one thing the Syndicate valued above all else in its operatives: sheer, dumb, blind luck. And as he stepped into the cold, metallic confines of the ejection pod, he had the sinking feeling that his luck had just run out. Chapter 2. The Void's Embrace. The ejection pod sealed with a pneumatic hiss, plunging Kaelen into a cocoon of sterile white light and humming machinery. There was no viewport, no sense of orientation. He was a package, being delivered to his doom. For a fleeting moment, he considered fighting, trying to override the system, but he knew the futility of it. Zenith had designed this entire process to be inescapable. His only option was to play the game, to see what Valerius's true angle was. The Syndicate boss didn't waste assets. There had to be a reason he was here, a reason he was being fed to this corporate war machine. The pod lurched, a silent, gut-wrenching acceleration that pressed him against the padding. Then, just as suddenly, there was a feeling of weightlessness. The pod's inner shell retracted, not with a door, but by dissolving into a million glittering motes of light that vanished into the vacuum. Kaelen was tumbling out into the vast, dark sphere of the C-7 chamber. His own suit's thrusters activated automatically, stabilizing him with a series of sharp, corrective bursts. He was now floating in the void, just like the mechanic and the drone. The scale of it was breathtaking. Below him, or what he perceived as below, the observation gantry was a thin, bright line of light. Above, the curved roof of the chamber was a distant, starless ceiling. The Wraith 7 drone hung in the center, a malevolent silhouette against the faintly glowing walls. And the mechanic, Zero, was a phantom presence, his gray suit making him almost invisible against the darkness. Kaelen's heart hammered against his ribs. He was a trader, not a fighter. He isn't as strong as most, barely enough to win a brawl in a back alley. His wits were average, useful for bargaining and spotting a bad deal, but not for outmaneuvering a state-of-the-art killing machine. His luck felt like a joke out here. Luck couldn't stop a plasma bolt. A targeting reticle appeared on his heads-up display, projected onto the inside of his faceplate. It was locked on him. The Wraith 7 had him in its sights. He could see the drone's main cannon swiveling to track his slow, helpless drift. Commencing engagement, a calm, synthetic voice announced in his comms, the same voice as the chamber's AI. The Wraith 7 fired. Not with the red glowing plasma cannons, but with a net projector. A shimmering web of energy shot out, expanding rapidly to engulf him. It wasn't lethal, but it was a restraint, a way to end this simulation quickly and efficiently. Kaelen's survival instincts, honed by years of navigating the treacherous underworld, screamed at him. He fired his own thrusters, a wild, desperate burst that sent him spinning sideways. The net missed, slamming into the chamber wall and dissipating in a shower of sparks. The maneuver was clumsy, draining his suit's fuel reserves, but it had worked. He had dodged. He saw the mechanic move. Zero didn't seem to be piloting the drone directly. Instead, he was like a shepherd, making small, subtle adjustments to its trajectory and systems with physical contact. He'd tap a housing on its wing, and the drone would roll. He'd run a hand along its fuselage, and its targeting sensors would recalibrate. He was tuning it, adapting it to Kaelen's erratic movements. It was an unbelievable display of skill, a fusion of man and machine that was terrifying to behold. Kaelen knew he couldn't outrun it. The drone was faster, more agile. He couldn't outthink it. The mechanic's mind was a supercomputer compared to his. He had one advantage: the Syndicate. Valerius would not have sent him here naked. He frantically searched his suit systems, ignoring the proximity alert screaming that the drone was lining up another shot. There, buried beneath the standard Zenith comms suite, was a hidden Syndicate channel, encrypted and untraceable. He activated it with a thought command. "Valerius," he hissed, his voice strained as he fired another burst of thrusters to dodge a salvo of stun charges that left ghostly trails in the darkness. "I hope you're getting a good show." "An exceptional one, Kaelen." Valerius's voice came back, smooth and unperturbed, as if he were commenting on a game of chance. "Zenith believes they have created the perfect pilot, a perfect weapon. They are wrong. They have created a tool. You're going to break it." "Break it? I'm about to be a smear on the wall," Kaelen yelled, tumbling through the void as the Wraith 7 surged past him, so close he could feel the energy crackling from its hull. "Your suit has a secondary function," Valerius continued, ignoring Kaelen's panic. "A payload. A prototype Syndicate disruptor. It's designed to interfere with advanced AI systems and neural interfaces. It has a very short range. You need to get within 5 meters of the mechanic." Kaelen's mind reeled. A payload? He was a delivery boy for a bomb? That's suicide. "He'll see me coming from a parsec away." "Not necessarily," Valerius purred. "He is a creature of logic and order. He will expect you to fight, to flee, to behave like a cornered animal. He will not expect you to do something utterly irrational. Something born not of strategy, but of desperation. That is your role, Kaelen. Be the beautifully, unpredictably, useless asset that you are. Make him come to you." The comms cut out. Kaelen was alone again with his thoughts and the drone. Valerius's words echoed in his mind. Make him come to you. It was a suicidal strategy, but it was the only one he had. He stopped dodging. He killed his thrusters, letting himself float motionless in the vast emptiness. He presented himself as an easy target. The Wraith 7 paused. It hovered, its systems humming, as if confused by this sudden lack of resistance. The mechanic, Zero, rotated slowly, his black helmet facing Kaelen. Kaelen could feel the assessment, the cold calculation. He was being analyzed, judged. The drone began to move forward, slowly, cautiously. It was taking the bait. Valerius was right. A perfect warrior, a perfect machine, had no protocol for an opponent who simply gave up. As the drone closed the distance, Kaelen's hand hovered over the activation switch for the disruptor payload on his wrist. His heart was a frantic drum against his ribs. 5 meters. 4. 3. He could see the details now on the drone's hull, the serial numbers stenciled in stark white paint. He could see the mechanic's gauntlet hand resting on the drone's fuselage, a gesture of absolute control. This was it, the moment of truth. He was either a genius or a fool, and he was about to find out which. Chapter 3. The Gambler's Throw. The drone was 10 meters away. Then 8. Kaelen's breath hitched in his throat, the sound loud in the silence of his own helmet. He forced himself to remain still, to continue the charade of defeated resignation. Every fiber of his being screamed to fire his thrusters, to flee, but he held fast. He trusted Valerius's cruel, convoluted logic. The syndicate boss had thrown him into this meat grinder for a reason, and that reason was about to be revealed. The mechanic, 0, seemed to accept the surrender. The Wraith, 7, drifted to a halt a mere 7 meters from Kaelen's position. It was close enough. He could trigger the disruptor. But he hesitated. Something was wrong. The drone wasn't powering down its weapons. Its targeting reticle was still glowing a steady, unwavering red on his chest. The mechanic wasn't accepting a surrender. He was setting up a clean kill. He was eliminating the variable. Game over. A new voice cut through Kaelen's comms. It wasn't Valerius. It was the mechanic. His voice was devoid of emotion, a flat, monotone delivery that was more chilling than any threat. Your biological and tactical functions are suboptimal. Termination is the logical conclusion. The Wraith 7's main cannon began to glow, a brilliant, incandescent white that promised instant annihilation. There was no time. Valerius's plan was a bust. He had been played, used as a disposable test subject not just for Zenith, but for his own boss. The Syndicate disruptor was useless if he was vaporized. He had to act. He didn't trigger the disruptor. Instead, he did the only thing his desperate, traitor's mind could come up with. He screamed. It was a raw, guttural sound of pure terror, a noise he had never made before. It was utterly, completely irrational. He threw his arms out, a gesture of panicked futility, and in doing so, his hand brushed against the emergency manual override on his suit's control panel. It wasn't the disruptor. It was something far more chaotic. The emergency override was designed to vent all non-essential suit systems in the event of a catastrophic fire, including the primary and backup thruster fuel lines. A plume of super-chilled propellant erupted from Kaelen's suit in every direction at once. It wasn't a controlled burst. It was an explosion. The force sent him spinning wildly out of control, a human pinwheel tumbling through the darkness. But the propellant cloud was the real weapon. It was a dense, freezing mist that spread rapidly in the 0G environment, engulfing the Wraith, 7, and the mechanic. For the 0G mechanic, even with his attributes, it was an unforeseen event. It was not a tactical maneuver. It was not a weapon. It was an accident. His suit sensors were overwhelmed by the sudden temperature drop and the particulate matter in the air. His neural interface, which gave him that perfect symbiotic connection to the drone, screamed with 1,000 conflicting error reports. Frost began to form on the drone's sensor lenses, on the mechanic's visor. His perfect control was shattered by a cloud of pure, dumb luck. In that moment of chaos, as the mechanic struggled to clear his vision and reboot his systems, Kaelen's wild, uncontrolled spin brought him within the 5-meter range Valerius had specified. His flailing hand, still trying to find purchase on something, anything, slapped against the activation switch on his wrist. The Syndicate disruptor activated. It wasn't a bang or a flash. It was a silent, invisible pulse of energy that washed over the immediate vicinity. It was designed not to destroy, but to corrupt. It targeted complex data streams, encrypted connections, and most importantly, neural interfaces. The effect on the mechanic was instantaneous and horrific. His connection to the Wraith 7 was not just severed, it was fed back upon itself. The pulse overloaded the neural pathways in his brain that had been adapted for the interface. He convulsed, his body going rigid in the void. Inside his helmet, his eyes, once focused and clear, rolled back in his head. The perfect machine was broken. The Wraith 7, now without its pilot, went haywire. It spun, its systems corrupted by the same pulse. It fired its cannon wildly, plasma bolts slamming into the chamber walls, leaving molten craters in the obsidian metal. It was a blind, raging beast, lashing out in its death throes. Kaelen, still tumbling, watched the spectacle through a dizzying kaleidoscope of motion. He had done it. He had survived. Not through skill or strength, but through sheer, chaotic luck and the brutal cunning of his boss. He had won. But as the drone's wild firing continued, he saw one of its plasma bolts streak not towards the wall, but towards the observation gantry where the Zenith liaison and her security team were watching. There was a flash of light, a soundless explosion, and the gantry ripped apart, bodies and equipment tumbling out into the void. The catastrophic consequence. His victory, engineered by Valerius, was not a clean one. It was a bloodbath that would have repercussions far beyond this chamber. His own suit, damaged by the fuel vent and now caught in the drone's erratic energy discharges, screamed a dozen new warnings. His comms were dead. His life support was failing. He was afloat in a disaster of his own making, the sole survivor of a battle he never should have won. He had succeeded, but the cost was total. Chapter 4. The Price of Success. Silence. After the symphony of destruction, the ensuing quiet was deafening. The Wraith, 7 drone, its systems fried by the feedback loop from its pilot's shattered mind, finally went still. It hung in the darkness like a slaughtered animal, its once menacing form now just so much scrap metal. The mechanic, 0, floated nearby, a lifeless doll in a gray suit, his perfect body now just a container for a ruined mind. The observation gantry was gone, a gaping wound in the side of the sphere marking its former location. Kaelen was alone, adrift in a graveyard of corporate ambition. His suit's alarms were a constant, high-pitched whine in his ears. Life support was at 12%.
Comms were down.
Navigation was offline. He was tumbling slowly, a piece of space junk awaiting a slow, cold death. He had succeeded. Valerius's mad gamble had paid off. He had broken the perfect weapon. But as he looked at the destruction around him, he felt no triumph. He felt only the chilling weight of his own survival, a survival purchased with the lives of others and the complete ruin of a man who had, until moments ago, been the pinnacle of human achievement. He had to get out. The thought cut through the haze of adrenaline and shock. He fumbled with the controls on his wrist, his gloved fingers clumsy and numb. The emergency protocols were still active. He had one last option: the ejection mechanism. It was a one-way trip, a launch into the deep void with no destination, but it was better than waiting for his oxygen to run out. He took a deep, ragged breath and pressed the final, crimson-colored button. A small charge detonated in the back of his suit, not a violent explosion, but a focused propulsive blast. It kicked him away from the wreckage, sending him hurtling towards the massive main hatch of the C-7 chamber. It was a desperate, long-shot maneuver, but his luck, it seemed, was holding. The hatch, sensing his approach and his lack of a valid IFF transponder, began to open automatically, an emergency venting protocol to clear the chamber of contaminants. Kaelen shot through the opening just as it began to close behind him, tumbling out into the main corridor of the Zenith headquarters. The corridor was in chaos. Alarms were blaring, their red lights painting the polished walls in strokes of panic. Security teams in heavy armor were running towards the C-7 chamber, but none of them paid attention to a single, drifting figure in a gray, non-standard suit. To them, he was just another piece of debris from the explosion. He was invisible. He used the last of his suit's strength to push himself against a wall, arresting his momentum. He lay there, panting, his body trembling with exhaustion and delayed shock. He had made it. He was alive. A familiar, smooth voice cut through the chaos in his comms, which suddenly flickered back to life on a private, encrypted channel. "Well done, Kaelen. The data you acquired is invaluable." Kaelen almost laughed. "Data? I didn't get any data. I blew up your test subject and half their observation deck." "The data was the chaos," Valerius corrected, his tone as calm as ever. The disruptor's effect on a neural interface of that caliber. The drone's uncontrolled system's response. The security gap you exposed. All of it was recorded by the probe I hid in your suit's lining. Zenith will be years recovering from this. The Syndicate, on the other hand, is about to enter a new age of technological superiority. Kaelen closed his eyes. He was just a tool, a disposable lucky tool. What about me? Your escape route is pre-programmed into your suit's navigation now. Head to Docking Bay 94. A shuttle is waiting. It will take you home. Your share of the profits will be substantial. You have earned it. The comms went dead. Kaelen pushed himself up, his body aching. He looked back down the corridor towards the sealed hatch of the C7 chamber. He thought of the mechanic, Zero, a man of perfect skill, undone not by a better warrior, but by a trader's panic scream and a cloud of frozen fuel. He thought of the liaison and her team, vaporized because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. This was the Syndicate's way. Not order, not technology, not survival. Chaos. Profit. And he was one of its most successful agents. He turned and began to walk, his movements clumsy in the unfamiliar gravity. He found Docking Bay 94, just as Valerius had said. An unmarked shuttle sat waiting, its ramp lowered. He walked up the ramp and into the empty interior, the door sealing behind him with a final, definitive thud. As the shuttle lifted off, carrying him away from the gilded cage and back to the grime and chaos of the fringe, he knew one thing for certain. He had won the day. But in the game played by men like Valerius, winning was just another way of losing a piece of your soul.